State-owned entity Transnet has reported a 1.5% year-on-year improvement in total rail volumes it handles. This is the first time the company has seen an improvement in volumes in 5 years. For at least 3 years, Transnet has been blamed for logistics bottlenecks, which meant goods produced in South Africa could not be exported in time, while imports were also impacted. Data shows that logistics challenges at Transnet have resulted in the South African economy losing an estimated 450 billion rand as a result of a poor terminal performance. Today, the company announced that its revenue has improved and increased by 12.8% year-on-year, just 1% shy of its recovery plan goal. Andile Sangqu is the chairman of Transnet and he joins us now. Mr. Sangqu, thank you very much for your time. You took over as chairman of Transnet last year in July and announced last year in July amid heavy criticism from the business community, for one, about the poor performance. With so much criticism, how would you characterize the first few months of your tenure as a chairman and this turnaround plan that you were updating on today?
Well, thanks very much to you, Polani, for the opportunity to speak to South Africa today. Just reflecting back on the time when we started as a new board, one of the things that really was striking for us way back then, and is still the case today, was that amidst all of the challenges that Transnet faced, was this whole thing of everybody, more specifically the customers, saying, how can we help? You know, we've always had a lot of goodwill despite the challenges. And also from the members of the NLCC, the staff, the unions, there's been so much goodwill to say, we acknowledge there's a problem, but there's always been this sense that Transnet continues to be very important in the life of South Africa, and it cannot fail. So I think that's really one of the things that gave the board an impetus, and but also we felt that as a board we needed to understand first what we were dealing with, which meant that it was more like seriously an immersion where we have to go into every part of the business, you know, starting with our ports, going into our engineering business, going into our rail freight business, into our pipeline business, spending time to understand as part of the diagnosis, looking at our income statement and our balance sheet. The confluence of all of that was to come up with what we considered to be a board-approved recovery plan. And the way in which we approached it was a bottom-up approach. In other words, in as much as we were providing direction as a board, seeking to understand, but we wanted to see ownership of this plan by employees, by staff, by the executives. So that's the first thing. But also we felt that we needed to set targets, you know, for ourselves. So as we built up this recovery plan, we set targets for the first 6 months from October to end of March 2024. And then on the basis of that, we say, what is it that can be achieved or attainable per each of the business, whether is it the ports, whether is it, you know, the volumes for rail, per corridor, and we did all of that work. The other part linked to that was the funding, because what we also recognized was that we had a huge backlog in terms of maintenance, which meant that we did not have a rail track of good quality that was reliable and dependable. We also did not have sufficient locomotives and wagons that were reliable and dependable. So we have to try and then cost and say, if we were to do all of this, what would it cost? But what would make everybody wants to help? So we have to make some commitments that if we get this money or we get this kind of support, And this is what we are going to get in return.
Let me just come in there, Mr. Sangqu, without disturbing too much. The time when you came in, I will take the Minerals Council of South Africa that represents the mining industry. They were talking about mainly two bodies that they were most worried about affecting their bottom line. There would be Eskom with load shedding and Transnet with the logistics bottlenecks. Many of those companies have decided to go to Mozambique and use other alternatives to get coal and other resources out of the country. So much so that the Minerals Council called for the head of the Transnet CEO, saying to the president she must be fired. They didn't call for Eskom to be fired. We seem to have lost the chairman there of the Transnet state-owned entity, and we were just getting into the thick of things. But on that one, we also got to speak for the first time to the CEO, Michelle Phillips. I believe that Mr. Sangqu is back. My point, Mr. Sangqu, was that even the mining companies did not call for the Eskom CEO to actually be fired, but they called for a Transnet CEO to be fired. It just shows you the important role that Transnet plays in the South African economy. My question is, with the companies that have found other alternative routes like Mozambique to actually get their products out of the country, how are you getting those companies back into the fold to convince them that you are now ready to actually accept more work and more volumes and again take their stuff out of the country?
Well, Tolani, let me start off by saying that the recovery of Transnet is a long journey. It has taken us a while to get to be where we are today. We are just on a stabilization phase. We've just completed the first part of this phase. It's an 18-month phase, which is just to stabilize the business, let alone growing the business. And this talks to the fact that we find a lot of things that were not working inside the business. So we are happy to report about what we have achieved, that we are beginning to see some improvements. And so we still have another 8-12 months of trying to build the momentum of the recovery. And we think that this really is to show confidence to the customers that we are now a reliable player. In other words, whatever it is that we contract with them to do, that we will do. If we say we are going to be able to make so many trains available or locomotives available to you, that we will do. And it's really about rebuilding that trust. So to answer your question, I don't think that we're able to attract all of those at once. Maybe in 18 months' time, we'll be on another phase. But one of the things that we wanted to do, first of all, is to stabilize the operation and stabilize the finances of the business. Because even if we want to attract new customers, we need to be a financially strong company to do that.
And that's a very important one. Just to continue on the finances, you touched on the fact that you are paying 13 billion rands just on debt interest payments, not on even
Correct.
the capital debt. How is that affecting that recovery plan? And what are your plans to actually whittle away at these high debt levels?
Look, I mean, I think you could look to, this is the picture. This is what we have inherited as a board. And a part of the stabilization of the operations was, once you stabilize operations, it enables us to generate operational cash flows, because now customers know that whatever it is that they transport would be delivered, and they can service their own customers. They can be able to export stuff overseas. And then on the back of that, they'll be able to pay us. And then we generate operational cash flows. So that part also helps us with the stabilization of the business in the first instance. The second part to your question is about then restructuring our balance sheet. And that is a process, it's a highly specialized process. We've just started a process of what we call balance sheet optimization, where we say, we look at the size of our debt, we look at the structure of how we are funded, and come up with a structure of funding that will help with the recovery plan. Now, once we have done all of that work, it would mean that we have to engage the lenders. It means that we'll have to engage the government so that we can be able then to reduce that 13 billion rand interest that we pay every month. For example, even if we were to pay interest only on half of that amount, say 6.5 billion rand, that cash is freed up for us to be able to catch up on our maintenance backlog and improve our operations. That in itself, it gives new impetus and momentum to our recovery plan. So this is part of the work that we're doing, but of course, it takes time. But we are at a stage, as we announced this morning, that we are now on course to begin the work on the balance sheet optimization. We hope that it will then free up, a lot of debt and also reduce our cost of funding. Mindful of the fact that we are still living in a very high interest rate environment. So we're cautiously optimistic about what's going to come out of that.
Yes.
But the message I want to say is that as a board, we've taken a decision to say, how do we manage the business in the short term? How do we stabilize it? But how do we build an architecture that will make sure that this company withstand all of these challenges, not only for today, but for the medium to long term? That's really the crux of the plan.
Andile Sangqu is the chairman of Transnet. Thank you very much, sir, for your time tonight, talking to us about their plans to turn around the ailing state-owned entity, costing the economy of South Africa billions of rands per month.